Rodak.com. Roll Tide. Hope you've been doing well. It's an exciting time of the year as we're starting to get into the off season. We still have track and field competing at the NCAA championships. We'll be talking about that in just a moment, but also catching you up on everything else that's going on around Alabama athletics. We'll go through our headlines for today thanks to the smart board that's been presented to us by RJ Young, and RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. First of all, coming up on the show, I mentioned track and field. We'll be visiting with the head coach of the Alabama track and field team, Dan Waters. We had a chance to speak earlier in the week before competition began yesterday for Alabama at the NCAA championships. 13 men, 13 women competing for the Crimson Tide, trying to vie for those not only individual national championships, but also the team national championship as well. So a good conversation with Dan Waters coming up. We'll be visiting with Canon Claycomb as well from the Alabama men's golf team as he wrapped up a tremendous season playing for the Crimson Tide as a junior. So we have a lot of thoughts from Canon Claycomb about his game and plus what it's like playing for Jay Sewell on this Alabama men's golf team. I think you'll enjoy that. And then for our final interview, our Writers Row interview, we'll be talking with Mike Rodak of AL.com. He was covering the SEC spring meetings last week in Destin. And also we kind of take his temperature on Alabama football at this time of the year as we're still a month away from SEC Media Days and about a month and a half away from spring practice beginning here at the Capstone. Other headlines, we'll start with track and field for today, as again, they're competing at the NCAA championships. 13 men, 13 women are competing as the competition will run through Saturday as they're alternating days up in Eugene, Oregon. And coming up in just a few moments, we'll be hearing from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Dan Waters. Baseball team picked up some honors all throughout this week as Owen Diodati, congratulations to Dio. He is a COSIDA Academic All-America team selection. He held a 4.0 GPA all throughout the year. He's pursuing a degree in finance, so great work in the classroom and on the field done by Owen Diodati, and then the great work on the field done by Dylan Ray as he was named a Collegiate Baseball Newspaper Freshman All-America selection. He emerged as Alabama's closer throughout the year, picked up 8 saves as one of the more reliable pitchers out of the bullpen for Brad Bohannon, and after bouncing back from injury especially, great to see the work done by Dylan Ray. Then some final notes on Alabama athletics for today. The softball team, more honors there, of course, in the classroom for Montana Fouts and Kaylee Tal, first-team COSIDA Academic All-America selections, just like Owen Diodati. And Kaylee Tal, tremendous career she had playing for Alabama, but also academically. Second four-time winner in Alabama history to be named first-team COSIDA Academic All-America. Crimson Tide have had multiple honorees in 9 of the last 11 seasons, so great work done by Murph and also the academic support staff helping out Alabama in the classroom in softball. Then in gymnastics, last week we had a great conversation, a one-on-one conversation with the new head coach of the gymnastics team, Ashley Johnston, and she penned a powerful essay. It's good to be back as part of the Tide Tribune series on RollTide.com. Hopefully you can check that out and hear more from Alabama's new head coach, Ashley Johnson, who makes her return to Alabama after winning a pair of national championships competing for the Crimson Tide. Speaking of national championships, Dan Waters hoping to bring back some hardwood from Eugene, Oregon back to Tuscaloosa as we visit with him first on Crimson Drive to get us up to date on Alabama competing at the NCAA championships in track and field. Coach, Roll Tide, how is everything in Eugene, Oregon?
That's great, Roger. We've had beautiful weather. We got out here. We're enjoying the facility and practice for the first couple days has gone really well. And we're looking forward to getting started tomorrow.
Well, we're excited for the Crimson Tide to compete at the NCAA championships. Just in your own words, how would you describe the journey both the men's team and the women's team have been on to get you to this point?
Well, that's a long journey. You know, it started way back in January for the indoor season, kind of went through and it's for both men's and women's, we've had, a lot of ups and downs, the men, finished third indoors and feeling like and at the SC meet, feeling like, hey, we probably had a shot to win that. And then having a great outdoor season, some of the best marks we've ever had, being ranked second in the country. And then just missing the outdoor SEC championship by points also. We did a great job at regionals and we've advanced our very best people here at nationals. So we're definitely trending up and having some optimistic thoughts for how we're going to compete for the men's team on Wednesday and Friday. On the women's team, very young, they've been able to compete hard and they've moved themselves into contention in a lot of events, especially in the short and the long relay. Have an individual qualifier 200 for a very young girl, Amari Brown, which we're very proud of. And then, of course, the women's distance has done a fantastic job with Mercy and Amaris and Flo. So those girls have done a real remarkable job of making sure they advance through all the racing they've done in the spring. So it's been a lot of ups and downs, but we think we're on an upward trend right now. So looking forward to seeing what happens this weekend.
What encouraged you the most about regionals?
Probably the best thing about regionals was just the way we competed. I was very proud of the women's relays. They really executed their tasks really, really well. They, left on marks, got down excellent, competed really hard. Exactly what Coach Gibson wanted to do. So I'm proud of that. One of the things that's nice about our men's team is that, we were ranked so high in so many different events that, they just kind of had to go through the process of getting through that meet. And that's just kind of a little bit of a pressure cooker because, you don't have much room for error and there's a lot of great athletes in competition. So the way we advanced, the way we competed, the way, we understood the process to the national championships, advancing and getting good lanes here, I think we did a really good job there.
So for Crimson Tide fans looking to keep up with Alabama competing at the NCAA championships, what can you tell us about the schedule in the next few days, or where can we see our athletes perform?
Well, the first thing we're going to have is a hammer throw tomorrow with Bobby Colantonio, which is an SEC champion. He was indoor weight champion, national weight champion. So he kind of kicks us off. So you couldn't ask for a better person to kick us off. And then it's just men tomorrow. So all we have is, it's a very short, compact schedule. It only lasts a couple hours. So right as the hammer goes off, all of a sudden we're kind of rolling into our events. Next event for us is 100. And then we have the 400, the 4-meter hurdles, the 200, the 10K, and the 4x4 are all back to back to back. So every time that you see a new event coming up, we probably got an athlete in it, which is kind of exciting, gives us lots of opportunities. And then hope we advance to the finals. And those are on Friday, in which we have the shot put on Friday, and then hopefully the finals and finish the men's meet on Friday. On Thursday, the same kind of thing. We start off, with the 4x1, then we go the 1500, we go the 200, the 4x4. So the 10K, of course, he's going to be one of the favorites in the 10K. So again, right on the track, just a very short period of time. From about 5 to 7. Obviously, West will just be kind of competing, cranking it out. So it's a really viewer-friendly atmosphere because, if you're a Crimson Tide fan, you want to see somebody competing. Pretty much every race we got up there comes another Alabama kid. So that's
we certainly like that. And how important is the mental side of everything when you're around these competitions, knowing that there's such finality to it? This is the biggest meet you can possibly have. How much have you guys talked about kind of the mental side of how to approach these very important meets and the last ones of the year?
Well, we talk about this all the time. We asked our athletes just to do what they did to get here, and so, we're not trying to set the world on fire. We're not trying to set these massive PRs to do something special because we've got the right athletes. And so if they do what they're supposed to do to get here, then the competition itself will draw out a little bit better performance and will advance and score. And once you make a final, the pressure's kind of off, like you're just kind of, okay, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to be able to get it done here. So, like once you get that first big throw in, or once you get that 200, final, then you absolutely have kind of peace of mind where you can go after it and see just what you do after you advance. So our biggest thing mentally is just making sure we advance and take care of our business the way we've done it all year long.
And Eugene, Oregon, once again, the home for the NCAA championships. What can you tell us about the stadium and the setting for these very important NCAA championship meets?
Well, you got to be, the setting is amazing. Take a look at the stadium. I don't know, it seats probably 25,000 people, and it's dedicated track field, and every attention to every detail is taken care of. The warm-up facilities are fantastic. You name it, they thought of it. So it's probably one of the premier track and field venues in the entire world. I've traveled a lot of places, and I don't know if I've seen one better. So and it just our athletes, really well. They're excited to be a part of it. They're excited to be out here, and it is a credit to track and field and a credit to the University of Oregon to put on such a fine meet and on a spectacular venue.
Well, we're looking forward to the NCAA championships, and we know for you it is getting close to the middle of June. We know cross country season's right around the corner. You have some recruiting for you. What's next for you over the course of a very busy summer?
Well, we're gonna have one day off, and then We're still working on our recruiting class for this year. We're starting recruiting class for next year. We've got, USA championships. We got world championships that'll go into late June and July. Maybe vacation, truthfully, spend some time with my family, and then cross country reports, I think, around the 15th of August. So it's just, it keeps going and going and going. I just finished my 11th year at Alabama, and it's just been a flash. And that's just what next year is going to be as well as this one was. Just so much going on every single weekend, every single week, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Neither would we. Well, Coach, thank you so much for joining us here on Crimson Drive. Best of luck out in Eugene at the NCAA championships, and thank you again for your time. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Thanks, Roger. Take care.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, we recorded that interview with Coach Waters earlier in the week, so last night some great performances already turned in by Alabama, and that'll continue through Saturday. Alabama competing at the NCAA Championships of Track and Field out in Eugene, Oregon, so make sure you watch and keep up with the Crimson Tide as they chase down more championships for the championship school. We'll switch gears now to golf as we talk with Canon Claycomb, who is one of the most decorated Alabama men's golfers this season, a member of the Ping All-Region team for the great work he did on the course for the Crimson Tide, and he just missed making it to the final national championships, as well as he had a bogey putt in regionals that kept him just out of the final field for the NCAA championship, but still a tremendous year for Canon Claycomb, and it was fun to catch up with him earlier this week here on Crimson Drive. Canon, Roll Tide. How's everything going as you're just starting your off season after a very busy season that you just had? Roll Tide, good to see you.
Yeah, Roll Tide. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So first of all, what has the offseason been like for you since you came up just short at regionals? What have you been up to the last few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really short. Golf, we don't really have a offseason anymore. I mean, I finished 2 weeks ago at regionals, and now I'm here in Atlanta to start my summer schedule, and I have 6 events this summer. So really not going to be home much, but it's been good. I've gotten to fish a lot, hang around my family, just kind of catch up and get some rest and recovery, and also a little bit of practice. And honestly, I didn't want to stay away very long. I had the bug to get back competing and playing. So the break was good, but I'm really excited to be playing again.
And the last time we saw you compete for Alabama at regionals, what did you like about your game, and what are a few things maybe you wish you would have done differently?
Everything was fairly good, I would say. I felt like I competed really well. I tended to get off to a pretty cold start at Texas A&M for the regional. So that was kind of something I wanted to change a little bit. Just kind of coming out of the gates firing a little bit better. But from an overall perspective, I mean, played really well. I think I was 3 or 4 under for the week, if I remember correctly. Finished 5th and then lost in a playoff to go to the NCAA championship. So felt like I played really well, and I felt like that was kind of a common trend, like throughout the year, was getting off to a cold start, and kind of been working on that all year, and I think it's getting a lot better as we go along.
Well, you mentioned a cold start, but to begin this portion of the schedule, you got off to a great start with a lot of rounds in the 60s. Just how were you feeling as the spring schedule began?
Yeah, I was feeling really good. I was feeling honestly rejuvenated because, last year playing, I didn't feel like I gave it my best for the Crimson Tide. Didn't play very well. Played okay in a couple events, but felt like I let some of my guys down on the team last year, and really wanted to change that. So I went to work pretty hard last summer. Played a lot of events, really didn't go home, see my family very much. And then came into the fall with just, a new outlook on golf and a new outlook on life, and felt really good and played some good events in the fall and felt like my game was really trending in the right direction going into the spring. And then I came out and won by 8 the first tournament of the spring, set a scoring record. And I thought that was just kind of like validation for all the hard work that I'd been putting in, and a lot of really good finishes followed that first win in the spring, and then got to go to regionals as an individual, which was really cool. And yeah, I think my game is just in a good place, and my head is in a good space as well, which is nice.
It's always important. And for you, when you're playing at your best, how would you describe your game? What do you do consistently well?
I feel like I drive the ball really well. I feel like I don't hit it super offline a lot. I'm not super long, so I do have to be consistent. And then I would say I'm a pretty streaky putter. Those rounds in the 60s early in the season, I got hot with the putter. Didn't feel like I did anything different. It just like they went in somehow. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I strike the ball pretty well. Just get it around, and then I'm really good around the greens with the wedge. So I would say driving and chipping are two strong points of my game, and then iron play and putting I've got to make a little more solid for the coming seasons.
Is there an area of your game you feel like Coach Sewell has helped you the most with?
Yeah, chipping especially. I mean, I came into school like not a great chipper at all, and I think Sewell is one of the greatest chippers I've ever met in my life. And I've hung out with a lot of really good players and watched them chip. But I mean, he completely transformed my chipping game, and it started my freshman year. I remember like exactly where it happened. We were in Cabo, and I'd hit it long on a hole, and he taught me how to hit this like high soft shot with a slow swing but long swing, and it came out really nice and soft. And I was like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. I should probably listen when he talks. But yeah, he's really transformed my chipping and made me become a really good chipper. And same with the driver. He knows a lot about the golf swing, and he's really the person that I rely on now for swing advice. I would say he's my golf coach and my actual golf coach. So yeah, he's great, and he's helped me a lot over the past couple of years.
So that's how Coach has helped you individually. How about as he leads the team, whether you guys are at the top of the leaderboard or working your way up from the bottom? How does he kind of maintain a positive environment throughout the golf season?
Yeah, he does a really good job. I mean, he has a really hard job being the golf coach at Alabama. He's won 2 national championships. And it can be intimidating for us players at times. I mean, we're going up against the best players in the world on really hard golf courses with the Crimson A on our chest. And it's hard at times. And he always tells us that, golf is a hard game. Just don't make it harder. And I've never once gotten to the van after a round and had him yell at us for playing bad. I will say there's a funny story. I'll tell this story. Last year, we were in Mississippi, and I was playing terrible. He wasn't upset at all. I hit a bad chip, and I kind of tossed my club in my bag. It hit my bag, and it went in the water. And lost my 60, didn't have it anymore. It's in the pond. And he had never yelled at me once before. I got in the van, and it was one of those things where he just said, I'm very disappointed in what you did today. And he didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice. But it was almost one of those things I was telling my assistant, I was like, I wish he did like yell at me. Like him just saying he was disappointed in a calm tone was way worse than him yelling at me. But yeah, I mean, he's a super positive person. He has great attributes. I mean, he's just so nice to all of us, and he expects the best out of us, but he knows that golf is a hard game. And like I said, he'll never get upset at us for playing bad. It's just how we carry ourselves, and what we do day in and day out is what he really focuses on.
I imagine getting to play for Coach Sewell is a big part of it, but when you look back to your high school days and when you're getting recruited by all these top programs, what made Alabama stand out and what made it the right choice for you?
Well, for me, like I'm from Bowling Green, Kentucky, so it's a college town, a little smaller college town. But Tuscaloosa just kind of felt like home. It was a college town, but it had a lot of very nice people, and you could tell that there was a town inside Tuscaloosa, if that makes sense. So I really enjoyed that. It was close to home. The practice facilities were really nice. And what I really liked about it was when I came on my visits and I told them I was a golf recruit, everyone seemed to be like enthusiastic about the golf team, and they cared about it. And even like going to football games, you saw people walking into Bryant-Denny Stadium with the swinging elephant hats on. And I thought that was really cool because I didn't see that in any other schools. So that was a big part of my recruiting process, and I'm very thankful that I chose Alabama. Everybody's been super supportive, and especially like around golf, they love the golf team, and they've been great to me. So yeah, I think the love for golf, the love for winning championships, and just like the sports aspect in general around Alabama really drew me to it.
You mentioned being proud to play with the script A on your chest, but what about that swinging elephant logo? I mean, you guys must really love that and kind of the brotherhood it connects you to all throughout Alabama golf alums and then Alabama golf supporters. You must love that logo.
Yeah, it's great. It's awesome. It's one of the things that Sewell did really, really well early on in his days here. So, like I said, like you said, anybody can have it. They can buy it on the swing. I think it's swingelephant.com or something like that. But yeah, it's really cool. I mean, you see people walking around campus with the swing elephant hat on. You see people at football games. I've even seen people with it on at like airports and very random cities around the country. So it is really cool. Like you see someone, and even if you don't get to say hi, you like somehow know that like you might know them, which is really cool. But yeah, I love the swing elephant logo, and we try to hoard those hats as best we can as players.
I understand that, definitely. And of course, as I mentioned, Alabama has a lot of great golf alums, including Justin Thomas, who recently won the PGA Championship. How much have you stayed in touch with him over the years, and how cool has it been just to not only get to know him, but everybody else that's played at Alabama before?
Yeah, it's really cool. Justin's always been really nice to me. Both Kentucky boys. We used to take from the same guy when I was growing up. So I've known him for a good amount of time now. And I mean, him winning the PGA coming back from 7 was no surprise to me. I mean, it was an incredible feat, but at the end of the day, I wasn't shocked by it at all. And I think he's going to win a bunch of more majors, and he's a very good player. And he probably is going to reach #1 in the world pretty soon. I don't know if he has reached #1 in the world yet, but he's going to be there soon, and he might stay there for a while when he does. But then the other guys, I mean, like Davis Riley's been playing great. Trey Mullinax has been playing good. I've really loved Trey. He's been super nice to me. He was actually our assistant coach for an event my freshman year, which was really cool. And then, yeah, I mean, like all the other guys, they come back and they practice, and we get to see them, and it's really cool. I mean, because they're doing what we want to do eventually, and they come back and tell us stories and tell us how to get better, and we get to work with them, and it's great. So yeah, I'm super thankful to get to know all of those guys, and they've all been super helpful.
And on this show, we've had the opportunity to interview Polly Mack, Benedetta Moresco from the women's team. Have you enjoyed getting to know them over the past few years and see the great results they've had?
Yeah, of course. The girls team's awesome. That is one cool thing about like our facility is we do share it with the girls. So we're always keeping up with each other. I love rooting for them. They love rooting for us. Benny's obviously an awesome player. I think she's like top 10 in the world. So she's an incredible player, super nice person. And then Polly's been, an awesome person to have around. She's a 5th year that just graduated, 5th or 6th year, I want to say. But she played, I mean, amazing this semester. And it wasn't a surprise to any of us. We saw her out there grinding and working every single day. And I think she won their regional individually, won maybe a couple of times this semester, and she deserved it. She practiced really hard, and they have a really good team. They have great coaches in Mick and Susan. And I would not be surprised if, they win a national championship in the next couple of years, because they are really good. And we love practicing with them. So they're great.
They certainly are. And of course, Alabama men's team is as well. And you mentioned you're just getting into part of your summer schedule, not necessarily with Alabama, but what do you have coming up in the next few weeks before you make your return to Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, so I'm at the Dogwood Invitational right now. It's in Atlanta, Georgia. Then I will have a couple of days off, go to the Northeast Amateur up in Rhode Island, and then to the North-South Amateur in Pinehurst. And then I will go to the Southern Amateur at Sea Island, and then the Western Amateur in Chicago, and then I will head to Tuscaloosa after that.
It's pretty good trips, pretty good golf coming up for Canon Claycomb. Canon, just thank you so much for joining us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Love getting to catch up about past season you had, plus what's ahead for you. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Thank you so much.
Best of luck to Canon Claycomb with everything he has coming up this summer, as you just heard him mention, and can't wait to see him wearing the swinging elephant logo once again for the Alabama Crimson Tide men's golf team. As we start to wrap things up on this edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota, we want to go back to Destin, Florida, where last week we talked with Joey Blackwell about everything that went on at SEC spring meetings. He was there covering it for Bama Central, but Mike Rodak was also there covering it for AL.com, and he covers Alabama football on a very very close basis and has barely been around everything that's been going on around the Crimson Tide program over the last few weeks, and with a look ahead to what may be coming up later this summer for not only Alabama, but for SEC and for all of college football. So a great opportunity to catch up with Mike Rodak, who covers Alabama football for AL.com. First of all, great to see you. How has everything been since you got back from Destin at SEC spring meetings last week?
Yeah, a little bit wet up here in Birmingham with some of the weather, but otherwise it's kind of that beginning of the slow time of year where your weekends are a little bit more free than they usually have been, which is always nice, and just kind of enjoying the time period between now and the middle of July once everything starts back up.
Well, there were a lot of expectations going into SEC spring meetings about everything that led up to it with Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban's comments in the weeks leading up to it. But did we really learn very much? Was there much more to that feud, if you will, from what we saw in Destin over the past week?
No, nothing really came new of it, which I don't think was terribly surprising, at least on my end. I think there's some people maybe who expected there to be a boxing match that broke out down in Destin, but that didn't happen, and I don't think it was going to happen. I think there's certainly a message, or whether it was explicit or not. I think there's certainly a message that was received, by both ends of that, where it had to stop and it had to kind of be put aside and have the focus shifted more towards the issues, which I think Greg Sankey was pleased about by the end of the meeting, talking about how it was probably the most productive, deep conversation that he's had in his 20 years of being around the SEC and being around those meetings. So, it doesn't seem like there's anything that really happened behind the scenes either. I mean, it sounds like Jimbo Fisher had a conversation with Nick Saban, and they decided to essentially leave it where it was. And I think even Lane Kiffin mentioned too that it was pretty professional in that meeting room where you had the 14 coaches and about a half dozen people from the SEC. And I don't think there was anything more that really came of it down in Destin.
And a lot of fans, when they hear things like Greg Sankey talking about it was very productive meetings, they're wondering, okay, what did they agree upon? What's new coming out of spring meetings? Did they really reach many conclusions about name, image, likeness, or the scheduling model?
Not really. I think it was maybe productive in the sense that they were able to air their grievances and have an in-depth conversation that was probably focused more on solutions than it was about what the problems might be and what other teams might be doing and all of that, where it kind of has been for the last several months. And I would imagine he was happy with that, but there's not a ton that the SEC can do. There's not a ton these coaches can do. It's really an issue that's bigger than just one conference, or quite frankly, bigger than the NCAA. I mean, it's something that Greg Sankey talked about this, Nick Saban's talked about it. It has to be something on a federal level where there's legislation from Congress that would change the current laws that are in place. Otherwise, the Supreme Court ruling from last year is going to override any sort of policies or new procedures that they try to put in place. I mean, it's just quite simply opening themselves up to litigation. And that's been mentioned several times too, where they need some protection, on a legal level. And as Greg Sankey said, he's not a lawyer. And obviously the 14 coaches aren't lawyers either. Actually, Mike Leach, I think, is a lawyer, but I don't think there's any, legal solutions that they can really sit around in that room and come up with. So, they can talk about what they might want to see out of NIL, what they might want to see change. And I'm sure there's a lot of that going on, and certainly things that Nick Saban himself proposed in terms of things being more transparent and maybe getting boosters out of the process a little bit. Those are some of the points that he brought up. But at the end of the day, the rules are going to have to be made on a much wider level than just the SEC.
In the reporting you've done on name, image, and likeness, what have you learned about the different laws state to state, and where does Alabama's laws kind of stand up to the rest of the SEC? The SEC has a huge footprint, we know, but how does it differ state to state?
Right, exactly. And there's definitely, I don't know the exact states, which might be the most restrictive, which might be the most wide open. In Alabama's case, they created that law last year in advance of the July rule change from the NCAA. So Alabama state legislator came out with that law, I think it was last May of 2021, which essentially was putting into place some guardrails on what NIL might be in Alabama. But then once the process started to unfold last fall, they found that other states weren't as restrictive. And so Alabama was a little bit at a competitive disadvantage by having more restrictions in place. And that's what led to that law being repealed in its entirety. I think it was either in January or February of 2022. So there really is no Alabama law anymore that would impose too many restrictions, but there is sort of the overarching NCAA policy that still remains in place, that it can't be pay for play. There can't be a direct payment made for a player to come to a particular school. Now, the boosters that are forming these collectives are certainly writing these contracts in a way that's not going to violate that policy, and that's kind of the leg they have to stand on legally. And I think that's sort of the problem, is that there's not much some of these schools or these conferences or the NCAA can do when these contracts are written in a very clean way, whether it's state law or whether it's federal law, whether it's NCAA policy. So yes, there is some, I would say, variation among the states in the SEC, but I'd say probably more variation just nationally, between, let's say, Alabama's law or Texas's law, and then California or Oregon or Washington. I mean, there's probably a wider range when you look nationally than there is looking across the SEC footprint.
So if nothing changes on a federal level or with an NCAA law, if things remain the same in place for this upcoming school year, what do you think we're going to be talking about at this point next year? Because again, a year ago, we never even said the word collective when thinking about name, image, and likeness.
Right. I do think that there probably will have to be a level of acceptance. I know there's certainly been a lot of opinions that this is unsustainable, and college football, and I think Eli Drinkwitz even said this, where they want to essentially save the game, that they feel like this is a game worth saving and a sport that brings the country together, which implies that there's a risk of losing it, so to speak. So there may have to be an acceptance that this is just the way it's going to be. I do think the turning point might be the November elections, quite frankly, and that's been something that Greg Sankey has mentioned too, where once there's more certainty in terms of Congress, then maybe they can start working with them next year once there's a new Congress in place, into January, once that begins in January session. So that might be the turning point. It may not go anywhere. There's obviously a lot of other issues in the country that Congress may be wanting to tackle first. But yes, there may just have to be an acceptance that this is the way things are going to work, and you either have to keep up with it or you get left behind. And I do think that is something that Nick Saban in some of his interviews has mentioned really as well, that it's just, you might have to accept it, just being the way it is.
So name, image, and likeness was a huge talking point down in Destin, but we also talked a lot about the scheduling model for football once Texas and Oklahoma join the league. We got some clarity on what basketball, baseball, softball may look like down the road as well. But what have you heard about the preferences for the different teams, or what the feeling is right now about an 8-game model with 1 permanent opponent, or possibly going to a 9-game model with 3 permanent opponents and 6 rotating opponents?
Yeah, that's really where I think you see the difference in some of the bigger schools in the SEC, or at least the more successful schools in the SEC, the power schools, if you will, versus the Kentuckys and Missouris of the world that are still trying to build themselves up. And we heard directly from those coaches, South Carolina, even, Shane Beamer, and they're essentially saying, like, we have a tough enough schedule as it is. In South Carolina's case, Shane Beamer mentioned how they play Clemson every year, and I forget who their non-conference opponent this year might be, but there's some big non-conference opponents that some of these schools play, in addition to the 8 opponents that they play within the conference. And to them, it's like, why would we add another conference game if we already have a schedule that's really tough? And I think, bowl eligibility is still probably a topic on those schools' minds, to make sure that they're getting to the necessary number of wins to be in a bowl game. And obviously there's, financial ramifications there. So, and then on Alabama's end, Nick Saban's always talked about wanting to play more SEC games, wanting to give fans games that they want to watch and they'll want to stay for 4 quarters for. And, adding a 9th SEC game would certainly do that. So those, I think, are the competing views. And I think the TV money is also working into that mix as well. When you have more SEC games, that certainly, is a good thing, I think, from a TV inventory standpoint, as, the word they like to use in that business. But and one of the questions too that came up is, if you play a 9th conference game, would the Power 5 requirement go away? And it probably would, to have that non-conference Power 5 team. So some coaches said it might just be a wash, where if you get rid of that extra Power 5 opponent, but you're adding an SEC game, then you're kind of arriving at the same point. So I think there's other balls in the air that they need to figure out too, with as far as the college football playoff and what the future of that might be. If it expands, are you playing more games in the playoff? And is that adding to the workload of a team that might be playing 16 games in a season? If you have a SEC only playoff, which is another topic that's been floated, would you be playing 4 games after your regular season SEC schedule? So I think coaches want a little bit of clarity on those things too. And I don't know if that will come anytime soon before they really, dig into a specific viewpoint on the schedule. Plus there's just, and some of the coaches mentioned this too, like it's 3-4 years away. And for some of these coaches, their minds are very much in this season and just trying to make sure the team performs well enough so they get to the next season. And that's just how, coaches need to operate.
Do you think we'll have any clarity on that, whether it stays at 8 or goes to a 9-game SEC schedule by the end of next season? Is it going to be next year back at spring meetings when we're talking about this again, or when could a vote be coming?
So Greg Sankey was very, very coy when we were asking those questions, during the press conferences. I think there's 3 of them during the week. And I think his answer each time was just, we'll see. And it was almost a running joke because that was continually his answer, and whether they'd have a vote on it and what sort of obstacles might remain, between coaches to figure out, what the optimal solution is. So it's tough to tell. I mean, he was keeping open the possibility of having a vote last week. So I don't know if it's years away, but he also said they have the luxury of sort of having their own timetable. There's nobody who's going to be pressing them on this to have it done right away. And I think he mentioned how when Missouri and Texas A&M joined 10 years ago, they waited until, I think it was the season before they joined, or the winter before. So I don't know if they want to wait that long. I think that would be the winter of 2023, 2024. But they have that luxury if they need to.
It's going to be interesting to follow. And speaking of following different things, as we get into the next few weeks before SEC Media Days come up in Atlanta, kind of what is on your radar? What do you keep an eye on when it regards to Alabama football or Alabama basketball, just Alabama athletics in general?
Right. I mean, it's definitely a slow time of year in terms of having any games to watch, which I said at the top, like that's not a bad thing. It's always nice to have that family time on the weekends that, you're in the thick of it. And football season, the basketball season can be hard to come by. But I think recruiting is always sort of the summer topic, and just seeing how those recruiting classes come together. Obviously, Alabama on the basketball end, getting a recruit last week in Sam Walters, and then, football end, just seeing how some of these visits go. Some big name players obviously visiting in June is typically the schedule. So, whether or not those players decide to make commitments in June or July remains to be seen. But it always kind of flips over to recruiting and kind of looking towards the future at this time of the year.
Well, Mike, you do great work covering Alabama for the Alabama Media Group, AL.com. Just thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to visiting with you again as we get closer to the football season. Thank you.
Sounds great.
Appreciate Mike Rodak of AL.com joining us here on Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. As we're still going to be with you on Thursdays at 2 o'clock throughout the rest of the month of June, so still have a few editions left. We'll be talking with a member of the media. Perhaps a Tim Brando appearance is coming up very soon. So we will keep an eye, of course, on all the latest college football news that is coming up. And again, we will be continuing to look forward to Alabama football, because media days are still right around the corner after we take a 2-week break in early July. It'll be time to be back for SEC Media Days. And, not long after that, the start of spring football or fall football coming up for the Crimson Tide to get ready for this upcoming season. But that's going to be a wrap on this edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. We certainly thank all of you for watching. Thanks to Ethan Carabin for producing this show, as well as our guests, Mike Rodak of AL.com, Canon Claycomb of the Alabama men's golf team, and then the head coach for Alabama track and field, Dan Waters. Thanks to all of them for joining us on this edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Check them out online at TuscaloosaToyota.com. Till next week, next Thursday at 2 p.m. for another edition of Crimson Drive. This has been Roger Hoover saying roll tide and have a great weekend.